21 foods once eaten only by the poor, now served to billionaires. There was a time when these dishes were meant only for those who slept on the floor, who barely had bread to eat. But today, these same foods are served at the world's most expensive restaurants, with silk napkins, gold-plated cutlery, and a $500 0-cents bill. 15 meals of the poor, which once meant the difference between life and death, have now become symbols of elite luxury. And when you find out that there's one dish that used to be made next to a gutter in medieval Europe and now costs $800 0-cents in Dubai, you might just lose your appetite. 1. Bone broth, a mother's empty kitchen, a celebrity's beauty secret. Imagine a dark room, a tiny fire still burning, and a mother tired as stone, making soup for her child. She has nothing, just a single bone. She drops that bone into water, adds a pinch of salt, and keeps it simmering all night until her child falls asleep. That was bone broth. Once, this was a survival meal for the poor. When meat was too expensive, people would get leftover bones from the butcher and turn them into soup. The secret? It was packed with calcium, collagen, and minerals. Today, you can buy a cup of organic, grass-fed bone broth at detox bars in Los Angeles for $22 0-cents, with collagen added, thyme and rosemary for garnish. The broth of the poor is now a beauty elixir for the rich and famous. 2. Sourdough bread, fuel of the hungry, now an Instagram hero. In medieval Europe, there were no fridges, no instant yeast. Whatever food remained, people learned to ferment it, and thus was born sourdough bread. Its smell was strong, the texture chewy, and the taste a bit acidic, but it fueled entire days for those who couldn't afford anything else. The dough had to rise for 24 hours. Poor folks would place it near the stove for warmth, and when hunger struck, this bread was their lifeline. People stand in line for 3 hours in Brooklyn just to buy one sourdough loaf, $18 0-cents per piece. And on Instagram, the cut section is called the crumb shot. 3. Roasted garlic, poor man's medicine, today's health craze. There was a time when garlic was called the doctor of the poor. Whether it was a cold, infection, or just weakness, people would rub garlic on a piece of bread and eat it. Roasted garlic was made only because there were no vegetables. They'd roast the garlic directly in the fire, turning it into a soft paste. It had a strong taste, but people believed it boosted immunity. Today, Michelin star chefs mix roasted garlic with truffle oil and serve it on pastas and gourmet pizzas. Health stores sell black garlic paste at $30 0-cents a jar, and people call it an anti-aging miracle. 4. Fermented honey, the poor's sweet escape, now gourmet gold. In medieval times, honey fermented naturally over time. As it aged, it turned slightly sour, developed depth, and was considered even more medicinal. Poor families preserved it carefully, ate it on bread, or just took a spoonful for comfort. Today, fermented honey comes with a limited reserve label at gourmet stores, $45 0-cents for 150 ml. And wellness influencers call it a gut-healing ancient treasure. 5. Polenta, farmer's porridge, fine dining's golden side. In the early villages of Italy, a yellow porridge was made from maize flour, water, and a little salt. Its name? Polenta. Plain and boring to most, but for poor farmers, it was sustenance. After a long day of labor, a hot bowl of polenta was their only reward. Today, in Rome's fine dining restaurants, polenta is served with truffle foam as the plate's centerpiece. Topped with microgreens, it now costs $40 0-cents per serving. 6. Kale, the wild village green, now the detox king. There was a time when kale grew wild on farms, unwanted and uncared for. It was leafy, bitter, cheap, a jungle green picked only by the poor or found in the wilderness. Village women would boil it without ghee or lard, using only water and spices ground on stone. Its taste was harsh, but during winter, it was the most affordable source of iron and fiber. Today, on New York brunch menus, you'll find kale salad with avocado and pumpkin seeds for $24 0-cents per bowl. And Instagram health gurus start every detox plan with a kale smoothie. Kale, once a jungle weed, now a jet-setter's breakfast, essential. 7. Congee rice and water for survival, now a designer dish. Congee or kishti isn't just a South Asian thing. Poor families across China, Korea, and Japan would boil rice with 10 times more water to feed more mouths with less food. Less rice, more water, that was the formula for congee. Sometimes they'd throw in a bit of egg or lentil. But it was always an illness food, made when someone was sick or when there was nothing else to cook. Today, from Tokyo to Paris, rice porridge is served in designer bowls. With duck egg truffle oil and miso paste, it sells for up to $32.00 a serving. What was once made to fill stomachs is now used to flatten them. 8. Salt cod. Preserved fish for survival, now a luxury bite. In the North Atlantic, when fishermen caught cod, it couldn't be eaten fresh immediately. So they preserved it with salt. Salt cod or bacalao was cooked in every poor European home. Fried or stewed, it was salty, chewy, and plain. But in the harsh winters, it kept people alive when nothing else was available. Today, in seafood restaurants in Barcelona, Lisbon, and Rome, you'll find salt cod croquettes and bacalao truffle mash. A single plate? €38.00 or $45.00. Once a last resort meal, now a prized delicacy. 9. Lentil stew, protein of the poor, now a plant-based power bowl. Lentils a staple in every poor household. No vegetables? Make lentils. No meat? Lentils? Fast to cook, full of protein and enough to fill a belly. In medieval Europe, red and brown lentils were turned into stews with onions, garlic, and sometimes vinegar or herbs. The dish was simple, warm, and deeply nourishing. Today, Los Angeles vegan cafes serve it as lentil walnut stew with roasted beetroot. Price $28.00 with Instagram captions like, "Sustainable protein never tasted so good." What was once a survival dish is now a lifestyle choice. 10. Foraged mushrooms, jungle's risky gift, now Michelin star. Wild mushrooms once grew freely in Europe's forests, but picking them was risky. Only those trained by grandparents dared forage, recognizing edible varieties from poisonous ones. Poor families who couldn't afford markets would search for chanterelles, porcini, or morels at dawn. They'd roast them over fire, eat them with bread, or add them to stews. Today, in Michelin star restaurants in Paris, foraged wild mushroom risotto or mushroom foam is a gourmet experience. Price per dish, anywhere from $60.00 to $95.00. What once came with fear of poison is now a fine dining fashion. 11. Rye bread, the bread of the poor, now a digestive delight. Wheat was expensive. So what did the poor do? They used rye, a hard grain that grew even in rocky soil. Rye bread was dark, heavy, and slightly bitter. It was never seen as fit for the tables of the rich. But for the poor, it was filling and long-lasting. In times without refrigeration, this bread stayed fresh for up to 4 days. Today, in Scandinavian and German bakeries, sourdough rye is praised for digestion and health. Designer cafes now serve it with smoked salmon and whipped goat cheese. The bread that once symbolized class divide is now the choice of elite palates. 12. Onion soup. Once called the soul of the home, now the crown of French cuisine. Onions were available everywhere. When nothing else was left in the kitchen, people made onion soup. They would slow cook onions, add water or bone broth, and create a warm, soothing soup, a quiet comfort for the poor. In France, it was known as soupe à l'oignon. A slice of bread, a bit of melted cheese, and that was enough. Today, it's a luxury starter. Menus of high-end French restaurants now feature caramelized onion consommé with Gruyere toast for $35.00. The onion that once brought tears while chopping now brings joy in five-star dining. 13. Collard greens, village vegetable, now a wellness leaf. In rural parts of southern Europe and Africa, collard greens grew at the edges of forests and fields. These leaves were picked by poor families who couldn't afford market vegetables. Women would gather them, wash them of mud, and cook them slowly throughout the day. Sometimes a scrap of meat, sometimes just bone broth. Collard greens were rich in vitamins and fiber, yet seen as unworthy of attention. Today, at Los Angeles juice bars, collard greens are sold as cold-pressed detox shots. Plant-based dietitians call them green gold. Leaves, once gathered in bare hands, are now handled with designer gloves. 14. Cottage cheese, the poor man's way to save milk, now a fitness icon. There was a time when people curdled milk before it spoiled. By adding vinegar or lemon, they separated water from soft cheese, what we now call cottage cheese. The poor ate it with bread or mixed it into lentils, rich in protein, but in reality just a way to prevent waste. No one considered it a luxury, it was simply what was left from the milk. Today, gym lovers, keto followers, and Hollywood models call it the king of lean protein. Low-fat organic whipped cottage cheese with basil oil features in New York brunch menus. Fitness stores sell protein-packed tubs for $12.00. What was once milk damage control now stars in elite meal plans. 15. Barley gruel, morning meal of the poor, now a gourmet breakfast. A cold morning, a slum village. A mother drops barley and water into a clay pot. As it slow cooks, it becomes thick and basic. Barley gruel, a humble porridge. It was the breakfast of people who had no lentils, no vegetables. Just a clay spoon in hand and a warm bowl in front. Yet this simple gruel was full of fiber, minerals, and energy to power an entire day of labor. Today, you'll find warm spiced barley bowl with almond milk foam and wild berry compote on New York cafe menus for $34.00 a bowl. Barley, once eaten to survive, is now the breakfast of Wall Street executives. 16. Beetroot, the color hidden underground. Once poor people's root. Beetroot was never a luxury. In medieval times, people dug it up from underground, a cheap root, earthy in flavor, and often bitter. But the poor boiled it, added it to stews, using it for both color and nourishment. Today, beetroot carpaccio with goat cheese and walnut oil is a star on Michelin-starred menus. It's now made as a superfood, a natural blood purifier. Price per plate, $35.00 and up. 17. Chestnuts, picked from forest floors, once hunger's solution. Chestnuts grew wild in the forest. Poor families would gather them, roast them over fire, and eat them for dinner, especially when even lentils were out of reach. Sometimes they even ground chestnuts into flour to bake bread. Today, chestnut purees and caramelized chestnuts are part of luxury desserts. Parisian patisserie menus now feature chestnut Mont Blanc, a dessert worth up to $60.00. The fuel of the poor during winter has become a holiday luxury. 18. Wild onions, pulled from the wild when the kitchen was empty. When kitchens had nothing left, people searched for wild onions in nearby woods. Their flavor was sharp, but just one or two thrown into a stew could bring food to life. It was the onion of survival. Today, wild onion chutneys and infused oils are used in luxury cooking. Charred wild onions with balsamic reduction, a $28.00 starter. What was once dug from muddy fields now shines at the center of fine dining plates. 19. Horseradish, spicy root of the earth, poor man's seasoning. Horseradish, a root with intense flavor. The poor had no chili, no store-bought spices, so they grated horseradish into their food. Its flavor was so strong that a little went a long way. Today, you'll find horseradish aioli and horseradish cream dips in upscale seafood and steak restaurants. A single jar, $18.00 to $25.00. What once spiced bland survival food is now fine dining fire. 20. Nettle leaves, stinging to touch, eaten out of need. Nettle, a leaf that stings when touched. But when there was nothing else, poor families would pluck it, boil it, and cook it into a bitter, iron-rich stew. Risky, painful, but full of vitamins. Today, nettle leaf ravioli with burnt butter sauce appears on gourmet Italian menus for $45.00 or more. Wellness clinics now promote it as an anti-inflammatory detox superleaf. What once caused skin burns is now plated with gloves and garnished with pride. Bolas, the $800.00 mushroom that grew by the gutter. There was a time when mushrooms grew only in the wet, dark corners of the forest or by the gutters. Most people wouldn't even touch them. No one could tell whether they were poisonous or life-saving. But poor mothers still ventured out early in the morning. Wrapped in worn-out cloth, they gathered fungi like morels and chanterelles and fed their children by night. It was necessity, and it required risk. Today, If the same mushrooms are labeled white truffle, a royal restaurant in Dubai will plate it in golden risotto. The price of one dish, over $800, 0 cents. And people say, what an earthy aroma, what depth. But that aroma, that depth, came not from the truffle, but from the muddy feet of a mother, the soil of the jungle, and a starving soul. This isn't just food, it's a mirror of history. From bone broth to nettle stew, every dish holds within it a hungry child, a mother's quiet patience, a grandfather's wooden spoon, and the very soil of survival. These foods weren't invented. They were endured, survived, and lived. Today they come with packaging. Back then they came with truth, labor, and desperate need. Closing message to viewers. So the next time you find yourself scooping up bone broth at a fancy restaurant, sipping kale smoothies, or breathing in the aroma of sourdough, pause for just 1 second and ask yourself, who was this food originally made for? Did they have a phone to take a picture of it? Did they have a table? Or just a small child who needed something to eat? These dishes are fashionable now, but they were created purely and only to survive. And if you are alive today, it may just be because of one of those soups, poured with love by someone who had nothing. If this felt like more than just a history lesson to you, if this felt like a memory in your bones, then don't just share this video. Remind someone. Remind the mothers. Remind the grandfathers. Remind those who didn't cook for taste. They cooked for life. Subscribe to the channel. Because here we don't just tell stories. We show lives. Truths buried in time. Still alive in every piece of bread we break.